Background: African gold mines, old colonial maps, French flags, African workers in mines. Narrator: serious tone. For more than 60 years, Africa's gold has flowed out of the continent, enriching foreign corporations and former colonial powers, while local people remained in poverty. In Burkina Faso, only 6% of the wealth from gold stayed in the country. The rest, it vanished overseas. But one young leader, Ibrahim Traoré, copyright, changed the rules of the game. In less than 2 years, he turned that 6% into 75%, shocking the world and rewriting Africa's fight for independence. This is the story of how one African president ended decades of gold theft. Part 1: The Golden Curse of Africa. Visual: African maps, colonial soldiers, trains transporting gold. Narrator: Africa is the richest continent on Earth when it comes to natural resources: gold, diamonds, oil, uranium. But paradoxically, it is also one of the poorest. This is no accident. For centuries, colonial powers built entire economies on extracting Africa's wealth. In Burkina Faso, a landlocked West African nation, gold is the backbone of the economy. It is the country's #1 export, accounting for nearly 80% of foreign revenue. Yet the people of Burkina Faso barely saw any benefits. Why? Because under contracts signed with foreign mining giants, Burkina Faso received only 6% of the total revenue. The rest was repatriated abroad to France, Canada, and multinational corporations. Think about it. If a mine produced $100 million in gold, Burkina Faso only got $6 million. The other $94 million left the country. Part 2: The Invisible Chains. How the system was built. Visual: French colonial archives, documents being signed, French companies' logos. Narrator: After independence in 1960, Burkina Faso, like many African nations, was never truly free. Foreign mining companies arrived with promises of investment, jobs, and technology. But in reality, they imposed contracts that gave them almost full control. The rules were written in Paris, London, and Ottawa, not in Ouagadougou. Local leaders, often pressured or bribed, signed deals that condemned Burkina Faso to remain dependent. And so, while gold was extracted by the ton, villages around the mines remained without clean water, hospitals, or electricity. This was the new face of colonialism, economic slavery without chains. Part 3: Enter Ibrahim Traoré. Visual: Ibrahim Traoré, copyright, addressing crowds, soldiers saluting, young people cheering. Narrator: In 2022, something extraordinary happened. Burkina Faso, long destabilized by terrorism and corruption, witnessed the rise of Ibrahim Traoré, copyright, a young army captain, just 34 years old. When Traoré, copyright, seized power, the world expected another military leader who would follow the same old playbook. But Traoré, copyright, shocked everyone. He declared, "Greater than we cannot talk about sovereignty if our resources are looted by foreigners while our people starve." This was more than rhetoric. Traoré, copyright, meant business. Part 4: Breaking the chains. From 6% to 75%. Visual: Gold bars stacked, Burkina Faso flag, foreign companies leaving. Narrator: In 2023, Traoré, copyright's government announced a revolutionary mining reform. From now on, Burkina Faso would retain 75% of the revenue from its gold. Foreign companies could no longer operate under colonial-style contracts. They had two choices: 1. Accept the New Deal and share profits fairly. 2. Or pack their bags and leave. The world was stunned. Western governments condemned the move. Mining corporations threatened lawsuits. International media called Traoré, copyright, a radical, a populist, even a dangerous. But for the people of Burkina Faso, this was justice. Finally, their country would benefit from its own wealth. The 75% policy wasn't just about money, it was about sovereignty. For the first time in 60 years, Burkina Faso held the keys to its own future. Part 5: The Impact on Burkina Faso. Visual: Schools, hospitals, infrastructure projects. Narrator: With the new revenue share, Burkina Faso suddenly had resources it never imagined. Billions of dollars stayed inside the country. The government began planning massive investments in schools and education programs for rural communities, hospitals and healthcare infrastructure, roads and energy projects to connect the country, support for farmers to boost food security. Traoré copyright said it clearly, greater than our gold must build Burkina Faso, not Europe. For many, it was the first time they believed that true independence was possible. Part 6, The Fight Against Foreign Pressure. Visual, UN meetings, French protests, Western newspapers. Narrator, of course, this transformation came at a cost. The countries and corporations that had profited from Burkina Faso's gold for decades were not willing to give up so easily. Pressure came in many forms. Threats of sanctions, economic sabotage, media campaigns portraying Traoré copyright as a dictator. But Traoré copyright was not alone. Across West Africa, nations like Mali, Niger, and Guinea were also rejecting old colonial contracts. Together, they formed a new alliance determined to free themselves from foreign control. This was bigger than gold. It was a continental awakening. Part 7, A New Model for Africa. Visual, African leaders shaking hands, ECOWAS meetings, gold miners working proudly. Narrator, Burkina Faso's shift from 6% to 75% became a symbol for the entire African continent. For decades, African leaders had complained about exploitation but never changed the rules. Traoré copyright proved it could be done. Other nations began to ask, why should we export raw gold and uranium for pennies, only to import finished products at high prices? Why can't Africa control its own wealth? This was more than a national policy. It was the beginning of a new African economic revolution. Part 8, The Man Behind the Movement. Visual, Traoré copyright with villagers, children, and soldiers. Narrator, who is Ibrahim Traoré copyright. Born in 1988, he grew up in a humble family, experiencing firsthand the struggles of ordinary Burkinabe diaresis. As a soldier, he saw how terrorism and poverty devastated his country. But unlike many before him, Traoré copyright refused to be bought or silenced. He rejected luxury, wore his military uniform instead of expensive suits, and spoke directly to the people. Some call him the Che Guevara of Africa. Others see him as the continuation of Thomas Sankara, Burkina Faso's revolutionary leader assassinated in 1987. Like Sankara, Traoré copyright's vision is simple: Africa must stand on its own feet. Part 9, The Future of Burkina Faso and Africa. Visual, African youth waving flags, gold mines transformed into local businesses. Narrator, the road ahead will not be easy. Transforming 75% of gold revenue into real development requires time, discipline, and unity. Corruption, terrorism, and foreign interference still threaten Burkina Faso, but the seeds have been planted. Traoré copyright has shown that courage and determination can rewrite history. For the first time in decades, Burkinabe diaresis people believe their children might inherit a nation built on dignity and sovereignty, not dependency. Conclusion, Call to Action. Visual, Burkina Faso's flag rising, African sunrise. Narrator, inspirational tone, from 6% to 75%. From exploitation to sovereignty. From silence to resistance. Ibrahim Traoré copyright's fight is not only Burkina Faso's story, it is Africa's story. A story of continent finally reclaiming what is rightfully its own. And perhaps, one day, history will remember this moment as the turning point, when Africa stopped being a victim of gold theft, and started building a golden future. Visual, interviews with villagers, miners, women carrying water, children in schools. Narrator, policies and percentages are one thing, but what do they mean for ordinary people? In rural Burkina Faso, where most of the population lives, gold mining had long been a paradox. Mines brought foreign workers, pollution, and displacement, but very little prosperity. A villager recalls, greater than we watched trucks filled with gold leave our land every day. But our children had no schools. Our wives gave birth without doctors. We lived next to wealth, but we remained poor. Now, for the first time, hope is returning. With 75% of revenue staying in the country, communities expect real change. It means a school in every village, clinics with medicine, and roads connecting farmers to markets. For many, Ibrahim Traoré copyright is not just the president, he is the man who finally listened. Part 11. Comparison with other African nations. Visual, maps of Mali, Niger, DRC, Ghana, South Africa, mining operations. Narrator. Burkina Faso is not alone. Across Africa, nations face the same dilemma. In Mali, gold is also the largest exporter, but foreign corporations dominate. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, trillions of dollars worth of cobalt and coltan are mined for smartphones and electric cars, yet the DRC remains one of the poorest nations in the world. In South Africa, despite being the continent's largest gold producer for decades, the benefits largely went to a white minority under apartheid, and even after independence inequality remains vast. What Ibrahim Traoré copyright has done is challenge the status quo. He has asked a dangerous question, greater than if Burkina Faso can keep 75%, why can't others? This question echoes from Accra to Kinshasa, from Bamako to Johannesburg. It threatens the foundation of global resource exploitation. Part 12. Lessons from Thomas Sankara. Visual, archival footage of Sankara, young people chanting his name. Narrator. To understand Traoré copyright, one must look back at Thomas Sankara, the legendary revolutionary president of Burkina Faso in the 1980s. Sankara, often called the African Che Guevara, fought against corruption, foreign dependency, and Western exploitation. He renamed the country from Upper Volta to Burkina Faso as the land of upright people. Sankara's vision was clear: self-sufficiency in food, refusal of foreign loans, mobilization of youth and women. But in 1987, he was assassinated, widely believed to be with foreign involvement. For years, Burkina Faso drifted back into dependency. Now, Ibrahim Traoré copyright is seen by many as Sankara's spiritual successor. Where Sankara's dream was cut short, Traoré copyright is determined to continue. Part 13. The role of the youth. Visual, young Burkinabe diarists marching, waving flags, students studying at night with solar lamps. Narrator. More than 70% of Burkina Faso's population is under 30 years old. They are the ones who will inherit the future Traoré copyright is trying to build. For years, the youth were disillusioned. They saw foreign companies looting gold while unemployment soared. They saw their brothers recruited by extremist groups because they had no opportunities. Now, they are inspired. A young student says, greater than for the first time, we feel proud. For the first time, we feel that our gold belongs to us. Youth movements across Africa are now studying Burkina Faso's model. Social media is full of messages saying, if they can do it, why not us? This is how revolutions spread, not just through guns, but through ideas. Part 14. The enemies of change. Visual, Western parliaments, mining CEOs, IMF and World Bank logos, military bases in Africa. Narrator. Make no mistake, this change is not welcomed by everyone. Mining companies have seen billions in profits threatened. Former colonial powers fear losing control over a region they long considered theirs. International financial institutions prefer African nations dependent on loans, not self-reliant. Reports have emerged of covert operations, economic sabotage, and attempts to destabilize Traoré copyright-esque government. Western media often paints him as authoritarian, ignoring the fact that for decades they supported leaders who sold Africa's resources for crumbs. Traoré copyright himself has warned, greater than they will try everything to stop us. But Burkina Faso is ready to resist. Part 15. The Pan-African Dream. Visual, ECOWAS maps, African Union summits, leaders from Mali, Niger, Guinea standing together. Narrator. In recent years, something remarkable has happened. Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, three nations led by young military leaders, they have formed an alliance. They have expelled French troops. They have rejected unfair mining contracts. And they have declared that their destiny will no longer be written in Paris or Washington, But in Africa, this is the rebirth of Pan-Africanism and the dream of leaders like Kwame Nkrumah, Patrice Lumumba, and Thomas Sankara. It is a dream where Africa does not beg, but negotiates as an equal, where its gold, oil, and diamonds serve its own people, not foreign shareholders. Part 16, Challenges Ahead. Visual, armed soldiers, terrorist groups in the Sahel, farmers struggling with climate change. Narrator. But let us not romanticize too quickly. The challenges are immense. The Sahel region remains plagued by terrorism, much of it fueled by foreign interests. Climate change threatens agriculture and water supplies. Corruption within African governments themselves remains a danger. And global powers will not simply give up without a fight. The question is, can Burkina Faso withstand the storm? Can Traoré tilde copyright survive the pressures that once crushed Sankara? Only time will tell. Part 17, A Message to the World. Visual, Traoré tilde copyright addressing the UN, African flags, young people across Africa rising. Narrator. At the heart of this story lies a message not just for Africa, but for the entire world. Global justice cannot exist while Africa is robbed of its wealth. The smartphones we use, the jewelry we wear, the cars we drive, and many of them depend on resources taken from Africa at unfair prices. Ibrahim Traoré tilde copyright is asking the world a simple question. Greater than, will you treat us as partners? Or will you continue to treat us as colonies? The answer will shape the 21st century. Final conclusion. Visual, African sunrise, miners smiling, children studying, Burkina Faso's flag flying high. Narrator, powerful, hopeful tone, from 6% to 75%. A simple statistic, but one that carries the weight of history. It is the story of resistance against 60 years of exploitation. It is the story of a young leader who dared to challenge empires. And it is the story of a people who are finally saying, greater than our gold is ours, our future is ours, our destiny is ours. Burkina Faso's fight is far from over. But perhaps, just perhaps, this is the beginning of a golden age for Africa.